Thanks so much, Manas, for taking the time, and thanks so much for being a part of the Money Show. I want to start by asking a very simple question. What is this change that we're talking about for auto debit, and why is it something that our viewers need to pay attention to?
Sure. Thank you so much, Alex, for having me. Great pleasure to talk to you and your audience. So let's talk about what is this change is all about, right? So as you refer, the auto debit or recurring payment or standing instruction, no matter what you call it, generally it happens in a two-leg process, right? So the first leg is when a customer goes to a website or app, let's call them merchants, and subscribes for a plan, right? Whether it's your entertainment package, whether it's your phone bill, whether it is your magazine and newspaper subscription, you go and subscribe to a plan. And at that time, you give your card details, you select a plan, you select your billing cycle, and you authenticate yourself, right? So that is called the registration process or the mandate process. Now, what happens subsequent to that is when the billing cycle comes, the merchant can trigger the auto debit from your card and get that transaction completed without you coming and doing anything, right? That is how it has been working in the card. But the challenge here is it was never a standard practice or a regulated practice. It is something that is like a best practice the industry was following, right? So, and there are multiple challenges when it comes to this particular flow, and whose accountability is to ensure that the flow works as we described it, right? So let's talk about some of the challenges. First of all, how do you link the registration transaction that you did, where you give all the details, against the subsequent or the recurring transaction that happened, right? Who has that information that this two are linked? Currently, your issuer bank doesn't know that. A lot of players in the ecosystem do not know that. That information is with the merchant where you signed up. So that's a challenge number one. Challenge number two is, as a user, currently you do not know when this transaction is getting executed next time, right? Many of you would have seen, suddenly you get a message saying that, hey, this much money has been debited from your card, and you'll be wondering for a while why that is happening. You sometimes also get a message saying that, hey, this is debited without any second factor authentication. So sometimes you'll start wondering what is happening to your card. And then it comes to your mind that, okay, this is something I had subscribed a year back, right? So that's kind of the challenge number two. The challenge number three is, okay, what happens if you do not need that plan anymore, right? Where do you go and cancel it, right? As I said, you don't come to know till the transaction has happened. So many times after that, you go and look for where to cancel. Some of the best merchants who are giving you experiences, you can find it easily, cancel it. In some other cases, you might have to struggle a little bit more, right? So these are the potential pitfalls or loopholes that existed in the recurring payment or SI, like the standing instruction process, right? So what RBI has done in the 2019 circular, they have made it extremely standardized, saying that this is how the flow is going to work. And primarily the accountability of making this work falls to the issuing bank who has issued you the card. Right? That is where the crux of the change is. Making sure your mandate transaction and recurring transaction are linked is something that issuer has to ensure. Making sure as a user you get the notification before the debit happens from your account, that also issuer needs to ensure. And the third one is where you don't have currently an option, easy option to go and cancel your subscription or see what all subscription you've given. That also something the issuer have to ensure that happens going forward. So that is kind of simplifying and the crux of the change that is coming into effect from 1st of
Understood. Okay, so the need is very clearly explained. In fact, I remember there is, if I'm not mistaken, the Play Store on the PlayStation, for example. If you subscribe to the annual subscription, then it automatically debits. I know that this is the case, and there are obviously several other services that also work like that. So what you're saying is absolutely right. Sometimes you may not intend to renew, and you've done it without your knowledge. So I understand that there was a need. What is the range of services, Manas, that you can talk about, and what payment options? So this affects everything, including, so suppose if I've given a UPI as an option, or if I've given a debit card, or is it only debit cards and credit cards?
Good question, Alex. So the circular clearly talked about the card transactions, and the good part of UPI and the e-mandates that you give on your net banking. The good part about them is they were kind of already compliant, right? So UPI auto-pay or UPI recurring came into effect last year, and many of the things that we are talking about now for cards was already built in when that system was built. Right? Similarly, when you give an e-mandate for your net banking transaction, it has a very explicit registration process, right? That again goes to your issuer. So some of this were already taken care of. This particular circular talks very specifically about your credit card and debit cards.
Understood. Now, one of the concerns I think a lot of people viewing even this show will have is what happens to EMI payments, what happens to SIPs. These are also technically standing instructions. Is that going to get affected in any way?
Absolutely. So anything which is recurring payment on your cards now have to be compliant with the new framework. There's another additional piece of information that came in the circular, which is if your recurring transaction is above 5,000 rupees, then also you have to kind of come and do an authentication again, right? It won't be auto-debit, right? So some of these things is going to affect many of these flows that we're talking about.
Understood. Now, how does this thing work in terms of an OTP that is required? Is there a particular period within which you get a message, and how do you respond to that? What are the technical aspects of it, Manas?
That's a very good question, right? So what this mandates now is that at least 24 hours before your recurring transaction is processed, you'll have to get a notification, right? And notification generally comes from your issuer bank saying that this is the merchant for which this much money, specifying the amount that is going to be deducted on this date. And that SMS will have links for you to go and cancel the subscription if you need to. So it makes it very clear to the user where it is coming from, what action he or she can take at that point of time. Right? So that I think that's one of the best parts, that the user experience in terms of when the recurring transaction happened is taken care of by this piece.
All right. So Manas, this is the second time that we're attempting to roll this out. The last time that this was attempted, there were a few people or a few institutions that said that we needed more time. What are the technical difficulties that they faced at that time? If you can explain to us. And also, do you think that there could be teething issues now? Do you think that people will be able to implement this immediately?
Sure. Thanks, Alex, for that question. And I think any regulation change that happens at this scale, we can expect some teething issues or short-term pain. Long term, I think it is definitely better for the industry when things are standardized and regulated. But why I think in March, when the original deadline was, why many of us felt we were not ready? Because see, this, as I said, the fundamental change here is the accountability has shifted to the issuer. And for making sure this experience stays true, many of these things actually issuer need to do. Right? So what that needed is for players to build a platform that issuers can use to manage this entire life cycle of a subscription mandate and provide the user experience of canceling, looking at the subscription, all those things, right? So the platforms, I think, are ready now. There are many players like PayU who have come up with those solutions. Issuers are integrated with that. The additional piece of changes that is needed is on the merchant side, like large merchants like a Netflix or Amazon. They now have to start sending additional parameters in the flow itself so that issuer can identify what is the registration amount, what is the billing cycle, etc. Right? So changes also needed on the merchant side to come and integrate with these platforms. So that is why I think this is a large-scale change for the industry when it comes to the actual technical implementation. And when there are so many players involved, generally you will find the adoption cycle to be slightly longer. The good part is I think most of the large banks have now confirmed that they're ready. Most of the large merchants have already integrated. But there will be some adoption cycle for the smaller banks and smaller merchants that we will see. and I believe from October 1st onwards, so you'll see some of those transactions getting declined. Right? So that is one aspect of readiness. Second one is obviously what happens when you or me as a user have already subscribed to something which was using the previous flows, which is not compliant anymore, right? What happens to those mandates? There again, there are a couple of way forwards for that. Either we figure out a way for to get those users back to the merchant site so that they can sign up again, they can resubscribe, or find out a way to migrate the old mandates to the new compliant format, right? So that is what the industry has been working towards. So I expect some of the teething issues in that regard as well.
Just a last clarification from my side, Manas, because I'm trying to understand this as well. This 5,000 threshold, does that mean that subscriptions that are less than that amount go through without the requirement for an authentication?
Correct. So the way it works is, let's say you go and subscribe for a plan. At the registration step, right, when you go and select the plan's type, billing cycle, give your card detail, at the registration step, the authentication is mandatory. The additional factor of authentication is mandatory, no matter what the amount you're subscribing for, right? So it could be a 5,000, 2,000, whatever. The registration step needs a OTP or an additional factor of authentication. So when it comes to a subsequent recurring transaction, if it is below 5,000, as you rightly mentioned, user do not have to do anything. The transaction will just simply go through. If it is above 5,000, then users have to come again and re-authenticate, right? They have to again go through another additional factor of authentication. And there also this notification that we spoke about, that SMS that comes to you 24 hours prior to the actual debit happening, there you will see a link prompting you to go and do the authentication. So I think that way it is a very well thought through plan to manage all these user experiences. As the banks and merchants adopt, I think it's going to be a very seamless experience.
All right. So net, I think, Manas, this is a good thing, because I've heard even instances of people changing their card number in order or changing their debit card in order to stop paying for something that they didn't want to pay for. But it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for joining in and for setting the context for what will change in the near future.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you so much.